Back and bigger than ever, it's the Unofficial 40 from Soonerscoop.com. Now, here's the entire Sooner Scoop crew. Carey, Josh, Eddie, and
George.
All right, welcome back. It is the Unofficial 40 podcast right here on Soonerscoop.com. We are live from the Sooner Scoop studios where almost the whole gang is here. Josh is with us, George, Eddie, myself, as we get ready for the last week of preseason camp, and then classes start next week, right?
Yeah,
Monday.
On Monday.
It definitely feels like
Campus Corner has been full of people.
It's back.
Yeah.
Norman is back. All the students have moved in. I think that it just feels like this is kind of the turning of the corner, the middle of August. It feels like it. Practice, obviously, we've been out there a couple times now. It just seems like Norman, it's almost the flip of a switch, if you will, when it goes from lowly Norman summer hours to what this week is with.
It's just an energy.
Everybody walking around.
Yeah, it's just the energy
1,000-degree
changes
weather.
completely. By the way, George, Eddie, I believe you're going to get to meet my parents today.
Oh, beautiful.
I've met George's parents.
I've met your parents before, multiple times.
Okay, that's true.
This will be the first time for George.
George, I've met George's parents. Have you met George's parents?
Yeah, we went and broke bread with him at the Friday night before the Tulsa game.
Okay.
His dad made steaks. It was great. Hung out with Nala, the family dog. It was excellent.
The mean dog? Isn't it a mean dog?
It's a mean dog to a lot of people, but not to me.
Correct.
I'm a dog
Eddie.
whisperer.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
Are your parents going to make us steak?
No, they're staying at the Noun Hotel, so.
Oh, beautiful.
Well, maybe they can buy us lunch.
I'm sure the experience over at the Noun right now is a little
You
bit
make more money than they do,
easier
George.
than
They're
what it
retired. Don't go asking my retired parents to pay for your dinner. I'll do that.
Okay.
But you won't come down here and go to dinner with my parents. I got a roast tonight anyway. I got to get roasted. I don't even know how that goes in Oklahoma.
I'll come to that.
Yeah, is there spots for Soonerscoop.com?
Wait, you're getting roasted?
Yes.
The morning animals are.
The morning animals are getting roasted at Will Rogers Theater tonight. It's $150 a ticket. Are you down?
That's worth every penny to come roast you. And
Oh, you want to be a roaster, you're saying?
yeah,
I think I will pay for Eddie and George's seats on the stage.
What
do we need to pay?
I can guess what the roast would start out at. Carey's inability to record a podcast this week. That would be how it would start.
It would be on top of a list of things. But I do think that it would be weird if I went because, and it's not because I work for
a different station.
and that's not even the reason I was thinking of it.
Kramer won't be there.
More thinking so because it is in support of, it's a pro-Hamas, Hamas.
Okay.
Gathering, which I thought was kind of interesting. No, I'm just kidding. It's not.
What was that guy's name? Robert Butler?
Robert Butler, my guy on the YouTube comment section that thinks I'm some kind of far right-wing nut job, which I think is literally a day after I was like, yeah, if you need me to sign something to get the Secretary of Education or whatever the hell, the superintendent, if he needs to get out of his job, I'll take it over from here. I could probably do more.
Oh, all right.
Either way, it is football season, and Oklahoma did wrap up its second scrimmage of the preseason on Wednesday, right?
Well, you guys had a practice report already this week. Monday was our only media availability.
Talked to Brent for the first time, I guess, kind of technically, since practice had really begun. We talked to him after, 3 days of practice?
Well, it's great because we could ask him questions like, who's standing out behind your starters at certain positions, and when it comes to defense, at least, he's pretty open about talking about the guys that are impressing him in camp. There was some defending Jackson Arnold a little bit, just talking about how he has to face good on good more than anybody else, which...
Well, at the beginning of the week, I think we had reached a point, and we get to this point every year, it seems like, where stuff... I'm not accusing people of just making things up, but I think that there are thoughts and stuff that comes out from a practice that... It always gets kind of inflated because I think there's a lot of people that are just ready to see this team. And even though we're now 2 weeks away from the opener, there are storylines that kind of take on a life of its own because maybe somebody had a bad day at practice. And I think that's where we found ourselves at the beginning of the week, where we were having to not necessarily even defend Jackson Arnold, just basically have a load of reality and say, yeah, I think he's the quarterback. There's nothing to worry about here.
Look, it's one of those things, and George is going to talk a lot about some of the things that he's heard, but you're getting everything second or third hand. You're not getting to see things yourself. I mean, guys like Teddy Lehman, former players, can go, and we just had Dusty Dvorak on the Family Business yesterday. That's up on YouTube now. You should check that out with Isaac and Joe. But those guys can go to practice because they're former players, and they do stuff in the media, so they kind of send things out here and there. But I would say everything that George and Eddie and the guys have put out there is as far as I know, is very accurate and portrayed in the right way. And we have enough sources that we can check and double check things that and the crazy stuff like the Gentry Williams thing is I think something that kind of Teddy Lehman might have taken issue with, is the severity of how hurt he was. I mean, he was out at practice. He did not practice. He didn't practice on Monday when we were out there, but he was dressed out.
He was a non-full participant.
Yeah.
I think it would probably be the way to say it.
I would say they have several of those guys.
Yes. And
right
I think
now.
but that's the time of the year that we're in right now. It's basically an idea, and correct me if I'm wrong, George, of basically preserving a bunch of bodies to get them ready for August 30th.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the big takeaway. If you checked out the scrimmage notes I posted on the board yesterday evening, is there's quite a few guys banged up, and it's led to several guys that maybe aren't that banged up also maybe not practicing as much because they just can't afford to lose certain guys, especially on the offensive line. Branson Hickman and Jake Taylor both didn't participate in the scrimmage on Wednesday, which led to I think them tinkering quite a bit with that offensive line in the scrimmage. And guys like Josh Isosa, the true freshman, got a lot of snaps with the first team at center, which I think is a product of, okay, Josh Bates is our one guy left that's not hurt. And that's not to say Branson Hickman couldn't be back by the starter, but by the first game of the season. But I do think that, they're being very precautionary. And like they have another scrimmage on Saturday. We'll see what that looks like. I know that
how many key people actually play in it.
And I know they're also going to have an audience for that game. That is the alumni game. I think they're having like a barbecue after the scrimmage, so there'll be a lot of people in attendance for that, which is alumni. I mean player alumni.
Which spells out a very vanilla offensive and defensive game plan.
I would not be shocked if quite a few guys are held out, and you're even seeing guys like a Danny Stutzman or a Billy Bowman maybe not participating as much in scrimmages like this because what you have in those guys, and so you don't need to keep getting them reps and then one bad play and they get hurt. So that's kind of the takeaway right now, is that there's just a lot of guys banged up. Again, nothing serious. Jaden Gibson's the only serious one that we know of. Could some of these guys maybe miss the opener? Yeah. I think that's definitely safe to say. But I think that's more of just, okay, we can get away with playing some of these other guys against Temple.
I think more than anything, too, and, this is something that we had kind of talked about a little bit on the practice report on Monday, but it does seem like from an offensive line standpoint, if you can kind of take out the center spot, which is, most likely still up for grabs. I know there's some other spots, but you are getting a better idea of like, okay, maybe we should just focus on 8, 9, 10, 11 of these names rather than this big conglomerate of names at the offensive line group.
Yeah, I mean, I feel comfortable saying Jacob Sexton and Fabechi Wiwu are going to start. Those are the two guys that I think have performed extremely well in camp. I think Jacob Sexton's probably going to end up starting at left guard. I think that's been his best spot. That's not to say he's not also their best left tackle, but I think Michael Tarquin's done a good enough job to probably end up starting at that spot. We'll see. Sexton's still working at left tackle, and Hito Zeta's done a good job at left guard. So you kind of feel good about that left side. It's just kind of how is it going to play out. Right side, Fabechi is definitely your starter at right guard. Right tackle, I would have said a couple days ago is going to be Jake Taylor. Now I just don't know because he is a little banged up. We'll see if he's ready to go by the opener. I think Spencer Brown has had a better fall camp than he did a spring camp. And so there's maybe a little bit more comfortability there in terms of having him have to maybe start the first game of the season if Jake Taylor isn't able to go. We know Jake was suited up on Monday. I don't think he participated. I know he didn't participate in the scrimmage. So we'll see. And then at center is just one of those interesting spots where, if Branson Hickman was 100% healthy, I think he's your starter at center, but he's not right now. And I think Josh Bates has had a good camp. Troy Everett still isn't practicing. And so you're left with, a banged up Hickman or a healthy Josh Bates. And then you have Josh Iasosa, who I think's had a good fall camp, but I could not see him starting come August 30th. I think it's more of a situation where they say, okay, we need to keep Bates healthy, so let's not, again, run him out there in a scrimmage that doesn't mean a whole lot. He could probably use some more reps, and he did scrimmage, but I think it's one of those situations where they're trying to be very cautious with that spot because they just don't have a ton of bodies right now, especially with Hickman kind of banged up.
We're going to continue going around and doing a look around of all the positions at Oklahoma right now. Brent Venables had a lot of stuff to say. We're going to get to some of the defensive back stuff that he got into. You guys will also have another practice report from just the players that we talked to, and we'll talk about that a little bit here as well. But it is the Enjoy Vision Fresh Perspective look around. And Eddie Radostovich, I have one question for you. Does Enjoy have a certain amount of authenticity to it?
There's a little bit of authenticity to it, but especially when I, go on the record with Greta Van Susteren tonight on Newsmax, that's going to be good. Enjoy Vision is the best laser vision center in Oklahoma City. It's not even close. The combination of mind-blowing technology, experienced eyeball surgeons, and exceptional patient care was life-changing for me. What the Enjoy Vision is doing for the Unofficial 40 listener, giving $400 off of LASIK. All you got to do is go to enjoywithme.com, use the promo code U40. That is in the letter N, JOY with me.com, promo code U40 for $400 off LASIK. Seeing is one of those great beauties in life, isn't it? Helen Keller never knew about it. Enjoy Vision. This is where you
Heard
LASIK.
about it.
She didn't hear about it either,
Yeah.
but she might have. I don't know. I kind of lean to the, I guess category of
Stevie
people that
Wonder
thought
situation?
maybe she was lying about a lot of stuff, but that's neither here nor there. That will be on Newsmax tonight.
I think that had to be your first bit on the pod 10 plus years ago.
Helen Keller could see.
No, that Stevie Wonder could
Well, he
actually
can see. I don't think that that's a bit as much as it is the reality of the situation.
And that's when we knew Eddie was special. Josh, I'm curious. Let's kind of get your thoughts on just kind of what you've heard and what you've seen us report. And just kind of what coaches have said, players have said. Is there anything about this camp so far that you're just like, that's not good, or that's a positive that I didn't see developing?
Well, and I can't remember if this was in the now lost first recording or in the second one.
I forgot to hit record today, folks. Yes.
We only made it 10 minutes in, though. 15 minutes in.
A very, very minimal.
It happened again. It had to be the first time in like 3 years. But
yes,
I have a history of that.
It has died as a problem.
We know how it works on the scoop. Once something happens, it happens forever.
It's kind of like when somebody gets a DUI and then they go out and get another DUI. Now it's become a little bit of a problem this week.
It was cables yesterday.
Fair.
Well, I don't even know how to come back. But no, George had mentioned something where, and he was talking about, Jacob Sexton still getting some work at left tackle. And we all know, they're working Jacob Sexton, Michael Tarquin, Heath Ozida, and Jacob Sexton kind of at left guard. Part of me wonders if the idea to have Sexton at left guard is not, again, it's not just about, okay, this is our best five, but I think it also provides a lot of depth where, okay, Tarquin goes down, you have your easy answer. Jacob Sexton slides out. Heath Ozida slides into his space. If Jacob Sexton goes down, let's say you start with Sexton at left tackle, Ozida's your left guard. Well, okay, so say Ozida goes down. Tarquin can't just slide in and fill that problem. Like, I feel like it gives you a little more flexibility, and that's something I've been thinking about with, we've talked about it. I mean, they're starting to get a little banged up. You're starting to hit that midpoint in fall camp where you have to start weighing, okay, we want to be physical in practice. We want to really go at it. But at the same time, roughly 2 weeks from now, they want to be ready to go. They want to make sure they've got the bodies and the players they need. And I wonder how you kind of mix that, okay, we got to keep momentum going for the season, and at the same time, throttling back just a little bit to make sure you aren't just beat to pieces by the time the season comes.
And I think the one positive I keep hearing, about the offensive line in fall camp is they're running the ball. Like that is one spot where they've given the defense some issues. Is they've been able to run the ball pretty effectively. Javonte Barnes has been really, really good, and I know that until we all see it on the field, we won't believe it. But I think he's been their best running back, and I think the offensive line, I don't know, what exactly they're doing scheme-wise running the football, but it's been very effective. And then when they've given Jackson Arnold time, which they've done a pretty good job at. Now, the defensive line gets after him every once in a while, and I think they got after him last week on the scrimmage on Friday. But I know from, this week, when they gave him time, Jackson hit some big plays down the field. I know he threw a couple touchdown passes, one to Deion Burks, down the field where Deion Burks is just, I think flying by people.
As advertised.
Yes. I think he's certainly their number one playmaker. And then Bauer Sharp is somebody that I think caught a touchdown pass as well on Wednesday and has become one of those targets that I think Jackson has connected with.
Well, yeah, and I think we saw being out there the other day, I mean, you've got Gentry Williams is banged up. I don't know that it was a I think everybody was worried, like, oh, no, he had shoulder cleanup over the offseason. Is it the same thing? I think it was just him being banged up a little bit. Nick Anderson's clearly banged up a little bit. It does seem like, Deion Burks is kind of kept clean of, he still looks good and refreshed and quick, and I think Jalil Farouk looked good. I was out there with the receivers and watching punt returns and stuff like that the other day, and I'll tell you that here's the one guy, and we did talk to him on Thursday, that I'm really just kind of, it's not Javonte Barnes, and that I agree with that. Like, I have to see this before I believe it with him, but the one guy I'm most perplexed about is, could he be a difference maker, or is he just a guy, is J.J. Hester.
Yeah, I think everybody's kind of like that, because it feels like even since he's been around here for 2 years, I mean, he just hasn't been able to stay on the field. There's a couple guys like that it sounds like are kind of making waves here during the preseason that I'm just going to have to see it. And as unfair as it may be, I'm going to have to see it after September 21st or starting on September 21st, maybe even more so than, it's not like I don't care what they do against Temple or Houston or Tulane, but I think J.J. Hester is one of those guys when you start lining up against an SEC opponent, what's this going to look like? Are you going to be able to be a guy that, Oklahoma can rely on? Because I think that one of the things that when you look back at the first, 5 games of the season before Andrell got hurt last year, he was fantastic on third down. He was almost a safety blanket for Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah, I think the wide receiver position, look, it's going to be a large dose of Deion Burks, Jalil Farouk, and Nick Anderson once all those guys are healthy.
Right.
If you can survive, the first couple games, again, I don't think Nick Anderson's, injury is serious, but I think you can survive with the J.J. Hester out there. The guy that I think has a chance to be really special is Brennan Thompson. Like, I've heard he's just taken the top off the defense a lot during fall camp, and he's somebody that, again, he dealt with some injury issues last year too. I think he can be a huge difference maker. And then the other one is Pettaway. I don't think we've talked about Pettaway enough. I think he's going to get quite a bit of playing time. And so I'm not too worried about the receiver room. I know that they've got some injury stuff there, but I feel pretty good about – I've heard Farouk has had a really, really good fall camp too. They're doing some different things with him in this offense that I don't think they were doing a year ago.
It is kind of interesting that we talk about like all the defensive guys that are coming back and the experience that they bring back, but then you kind of almost just overlook Jalil Farouk and the experience that he does bring back to a wide receiver unit that needs a little bit of veteran leadership. And, I think that more than anything, if he doesn't have the fumble problems last year, we're probably talking about him a lot more. But I think he lost a little bit of, favoritism or whatever you want to call it when you look back at the Alamo Bowl and he had the fumble, or you look back at the Kansas game and he had the fumble, which was a big turning point in that game.
Let me ask you this, and we talk so much coming out of the spring about how it looked like, depending on Blake Roberts getting healthy.
Jake Roberts.
I don't know who Blake Roberts is. Jake Roberts getting healthy, but that tight end room should be so much better than it was. But there really hasn't been a lot of talk about the tight ends, and when we talked to Jake Roberts, he was talking about, playing for Seth Luttrell, loving playing for him. But it was almost like I kind of took out of him like they're do everything guys. They're not necessarily going to be, option number 2, when they have 5 wides or whatever. Not really a Mark Andrews type position, but more of a guys that will make big plays because, people think they're going to block on this play or that play.
Well, I will say one name that has kind of emerged, and I put this in my scrimmage notes, is Caden Helms. And I think that he's a guy, when you look at Bauer Sharp and Jake Roberts, they are kind of do-it-all guys. I think they've been really good in the run game. They run a lot of 2 tight end sets in practice, which, obviously they didn't do a lot of last year because they didn't have a second tight end. And those are going to be your 2 guys. But I think this staff really likes Caden Helms and his versatility. You're able to put him out in the slot and do some different things with him. He made a couple plays in the scrimmage that all of a sudden I think that you could see some different packages where Caden Helms is out there. And again, Bauer Sharp, I think, has been really good in the passing game. I think Jake Roberts is more of their blocking tight end. Not to say that he won't go out and catch some passes, but Sharp has been the guy that's made some big plays. But I've heard over this last week that Caden Helms has started to kind of maybe assert himself as that third guy at tight end.
That would be amazing. I mean, I
but
think
again,
that,
as we said, he's got to stay healthy. I mean,
the biggest thing for him the biggest thing for him right now is just he's stacking weeks. He's stacking days, which I think has been, I think a little bit of something that we didn't know if he was going to be able to do it at some points throughout the last 2 years since he's been in Norman. But I mean, just looking at him, and I put a clip of him in the Sights and Sounds for Monday. Still, literally haven't seen him run around. But we've seen him on the sidelines and stuff. He's every bit of 6'6", 240. I mean, from a physical standpoint, Caden Helms looks the part.
Yeah, but like we said, be wary of building your offense around him. As a big part, because
he's had injury situations, and I don't think that it's not his fault. He's had some pretty unfortunate situations, but if you could get a little bit of a bigger pass catching tight end out of that mix and put him and Bauer Sharp on the field together, that would be phenomenal especially for somebody like Jackson, who is still just a freshman. And it's like, you got to say it every time that you talk about Jackson Arnold, but there's going to be ups and downs. The ups, though, are going to be extremely, extremely good.
Here's the thing I'll say about the offense is I think that they're starting to click a little bit in the scrimmages and in the practices, which is great to hear. But just people need to be patient with the offense, I think, a little bit. Because, think about this. Of the 11 guys that they might start out there, you're talking about 8 or 9 newcomers. 8 or 9, or not just newcomers, but guys that weren't playing a year ago, right? Other than Nick Anderson and Gavin Sawchuk, there's not a whole lot. Jalil Farouk, that's 3 guys that, are the only guys that really played last year for this team.
Well, Monday, Brent mentioned so many young guys. I mean, he basically mentioned every player at the position. He talked about Ivan Carey, Zion Raggins, I think he mentioned, Zion Kearney.
Yeah, but I'm not even talking about just the receiver position. You're talking about a whole new offensive line, a new quarterback. The wide receiver that we think is going to lead the team in receptions is a new guy. Javonte Barnes didn't play a year ago, basically. They've got so many. The tight end position is completely new. So they're going to have some moments, I think, early in the season and maybe even partway through the season that they're going to make some mistakes and maybe not play as well. But I do think that the potential is there. That's what you're starting to hear is the potential of some of these guys and the pieces. Now they just need it to kind of come together, and I think that'll take some time. But the good news is they did perform, it sounds like, a lot better in the scrimmage. I know they had some turnovers, I think, in this scrimmage. I know Jackson, threw a pick to Jacoby Johnson, who, if we want to get into the defensive side of the ball, we can. He's a guy that I think has really stood out in fall camp at corner. And I know, Brent went on and on about the corner position the other day, but I do think overall the offense is starting to get better. Every single day they've got some bumps and bruises on the offensive line. And the most encouraging part, I would say, is that they're running the ball pretty effectively. And if you can run the football, I think that's going to be able to take a lot off of Jackson's shoulders. And then you start hitting some of those explosive plays in the passing game with a guy like Deion Burks or Jalil Farouk or whoever.
One last thing on the receiver for me. And I think I know this, but I can't remember exactly. But has Brennan Thompson been banged up most of camp?
He's dealt with a little bit of stuff, but not too serious. I honestly don't know if he scrimmaged. I didn't hear any notes about him on Wednesday. I know he had a pretty good scrimmage on Friday last week, but I think he might be a little nicked up, but nothing crazy.
All right, I want to tell you guys about the Game Time app, new sponsor to the podcast. Welcome them aboard. Go download the Game Time app. I know the guys in the office, you guys are always looking for deals for Thunder games.
Yeah, used it before.
Season. I know you both have used it, but it is a fantastic app. And they take care of you. They've got a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. It filters out the fluff. They only show you the great deals, and they show you what your seat looks like in the app. So if you want to know where am I sitting in Memorial Stadium on Saturday, this is my view. This is what I'm going to see, and it's a very personal experience. You just you pick an upcoming game on the app. Let's say you want to get tickets for the Tulane game. You browse through the seats on Game Time's Pick, and you're going to find great deals. I know, George, you use it because they usually have the best deals.
Yeah, they really do. And I know that it's an app that, like you said, it's really easy to use. Like I'm looking at it right now. You could go to the Temple game for $32. You could also get great seats down in the end zone for $51. So, you can go on there. You can scroll through all the games. Like I'm looking through here, Maine. You can go to the Maine game for $17. So I mean,
it's two games that the price of the ticket's going to be lower than the point spread.
Exactly. It's a great app in terms of finding, I think, low price deals, and then
Absolutely.
also kind of know where you're sitting.
You used it for game 2 of the NBA or the Western Conference Finals, right?
Yeah, I think I went to 4 playoff
semifinals.
games.
Excuse me.
When you didn't win tickets.
When I didn't win tickets,
Yeah, you won
I bought
tickets to game 1 and you bought tickets in game 2.
Yep. So it's a super easy app to use, and I prefer it over a lot of others.
They've also got the Game Time guarantee. Always get the best price. You find your tickets in the same section and row for less. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Also, just really good customer service stuff. Job loss assurance. So if you, let's say you get game 1 home game for the Thunder, you lose your job between now and then, you can get an automatic full refund. So, in 24-hour returns guarantee, return your ticket within 24 hours from time of purchase for a full credit to your Game Time account. And I know the app, you can bank some money. People can send you money. You can send other people money. So you can help a friend get a ticket if he's just short on cash.
Super easy to transfer them too. Like if you're buying tickets and then you want to transfer them to a friend or whatever, it's a very, very easy process.
It's gametime.co. Gametime.co is the website. So here's what you need to do, guys. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code ON3 for $20 off. Download it today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Great app for concerts as well. Eddie and I are headed down to Fort Worth this weekend to see little Kings of Leon in action.
It's going to be fun. I'm excited about it.
I don't think we'll have to pay.
This will be my third ticket or third concert ever. So, and the other one was another Kings of Leon concert.
Caleb's
so
very
I'm now
excited
2-1.
to see you because he's
I'm
a
excited
big
about
YouTube
it.
guy.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Maybe he's Robert. Maybe he's the commenter
that would be
thinks
awesome.
I'm a far
Find out
right wing nut job,
Robert
which
Butler.
is interesting.
All right. So talking to Brent, you mentioned the cornerbacks. The one name that he brought up when I asked him, outside of Woody and Gentry, who's having a really good camp for you, first name out of his mouth was Kenai Walker.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard great things about Kenai this fall camp. I think he's a guy. Again, we'll see who starts at that corner spot. I'm not too concerned about who exactly starts because I think they're going to rotate quite a few guys. But Kenai's been really consistent. I think that was the word that Brent used, probably their most consistent guy. And you think back to last year, he was really consistent when he came in for Gentry when he got banged up, and we'll see if Gentry's able to go for the home opener. Again, I think he's kind of in that category of guys that's like you can live without playing him against Temple, and you don't want to risk his injury. So we'll see. But that cornerback room, I put in my scrimmage notes. I mean, I think they're in the conversation for the deepest group on the team right now. When you talk about Gentry and Woody, obviously, Kenai Walker, Des Malone, who I think has had a good fall camp, and then Jacoby Johnson, who's really making a push to kind of be in that rotation. I fully anticipate he will be. I think he'll be on the 2 deep whenever the depth chart comes out. I think that's a really, really solid group right now. And then that's not even mentioning some of the young guys. I mean, Eli Bowen, who I know has had a really good camp. He's kind of playing some cheetah, some corner. I think he's even played some safety. And then Jeremiah Newcomb. was another guy that Brent pointed out, a young guy that's played well.
Both of those guys just getting mentioned by Brent, Eli Bowen and Jeremiah Newcomb, I don't know. It means something. And who knows? It could be a situation last year where they were basically kind of forced into having to play two freshmen in Josiah Wagner as well as Makari Vickers. But at the same time, I think that it's notable that, like Eli Bowen, I think the comment from Brent was basically, you can throw anything at him. Nothing is too big for him, which, I think we've talked about on the practice report just in terms of he's a guy that the IQ in that family on the football field is extremely high. We talked about that with Peyton last year as a freshman. So I don't know if it's a situation where you want to see both of those guys out there, but I definitely think that it just adds to the depth of what already seems to be an extremely, extremely deep room.
Josh, what do you think of Jacoby Johnson? I know you were high on him coming out of high school. I mean, you think to me, his ceiling is through the roof. Like, he's a guy that he might make some young guy mistakes out there, but he's also going to go out and like make some huge plays, some interceptions, things like that.
He's a guy, and you guys know how high I am on Gentry Williams and have been forever. I think Jacoby might have a higher ceiling, just because of his frame, how big he is. And the thing about Jacoby is, guys, that's one of those you guys know. I guess I saw him this summer, but I don't see him as often as you all do. He's such a big guy for a corner. Like, people don't appreciate that. And the way OU wants to play that underneath stuff and the way they want to be physical at the corner position, he can do that all day. Now, early in his high school career, that was always my question, but I thought he really grew up and really was a guy that improved every single year at Mustang. And I love the physical tools. And guys, I've told this story 100 times, and I just apologize because I'll do it briefly again. But he was one of the rare guys that was that first class with Brent. When I went down to Under Armour in Florida, I got so used to seeing the Oklahoma guys, and you'd see them show up and you'd see them arrive, and they'd just be smaller. They'd just be a little smaller than the Alabama guys. They didn't look like they physically matched up. And then you watched him, and he was probably the prettiest corner there, like just the biggest, most physically impressive guy. And knowing he spent all summer with Jerry Schmit, obviously a couple of summers now, I really like this. The fact that he is starting to come on, it reminds me of his high school career where it took him a little time. He had to get his feet under him, and now all of a sudden it's all starting to click, and his athleticism's kind of taken over.
He's also one of those guys, too, that felt like going back to Mustang, it was never a situation of, I want to go see Jacoby, the cornerback. It was, I'm going to go see Jacoby, just kind of do everything for basically everything, like punt return, wide receiver. They give the ball to him in jet sweeps, or he'd go long. He was never like it's so hard in high school to go watch a cornerback, because if you're really good and you have the notoriety, they just go away from you the entire game. So you're not really making a whole lot of plays. I think he just had to get kind of almost comfortable being, I'm Jacoby Johnson, the cornerback, rather than I'm Jacoby Johnson, like this just great football player.
And what I'll say about that, Eddie, from what I understand, the play he made in the scrimmage on Wednesday, it wasn't this play where it was just a bad throw and he was in the right spot or whatever. Like, he was basically, I think, beaten on a play, made a nice read and basically jumped the route and made a really good play. Like, that to me means he's like kind of clicking on what they're asking him to do, that he's there to make that play. And I think we all know the athleticism that he has, and we saw that last year. But if it's starting to click for him mentally, where he knows, what routes are being run, where he needs to be to make a play, that to me signals that this guy's ready to get on the field.
And it kind of coincides with everything when you're talking about the defense, but it does sound like, just from a defensive line standpoint, and I know that Dusty Dvoracek talked about it quite a bit on the family business this week with Josie and Isaac, just in terms of if they could get somebody or develop somebody on the defensive line to be that guy that on 3rd and 7 or whatever, 3rd and long, is going to go get after the quarterback, it makes everybody's life a little bit easier out on those islands or on the back end.
Yeah, and I want to get to this, but one more question for the defensive backs for Josh. Josh, I'm curious kind of your take on all the positive reviews that are coming out about Eli Bowen, because, him being in high school, being the younger brother of Peyton, like, I always have this thing. I love the younger brother thing in sports because you have the big brother and you have the younger brother. He always wants to be better than I grew up that way. My brother was 13 months older. I always wanted to be better than him. I always wanted to, hit more home runs or throw the ball harder. And I think as a younger brother, you're being pushed like most people aren't pushed. Like Peyton, I don't think he has an older brother. So I don't know. Maybe he did. Or does. But Eli, to me, when he was getting recruited, it was just one of those guys that you felt like a lot of people were overthinking it a little bit with him because he was a really good player, didn't have great size, but a lot of people just didn't pull the trigger on him.
I'll vouch just in terms of to kind of set Josh up, but I remember going down to see Peyton with you in that season opening game that they had that was on ESPN, Jackson and Peyton's senior year, and we were talking about Eli, and I remember you telling me or kind of disclosing the story just in terms of you talked to somebody on the staff that was like, we think Eli Bowen might be one of the best cornerbacks in the country. This isn't a charity case.
That was the adamant speech from the minute he was like, they were involved with the Bowens. It was like, it's not about Peyton. We want Peyton, obviously, but they knew they liked Eli Bowen. And it's some of the stuff, it very reminiscent, those conversations very early on, to what I hear Brent Venables saying now, where he's like, it's just easy for him. Like, he's just a smart football player. He understands our concepts. He understands what we're trying to do. And obviously, it helps that you have your big brother there that can be, all summer, all spring, they can go, have a burger. They can go do whatever they're doing around campus. And Peyton's like, okay, this is what we're looking at here. This is the technique you want to. I mean, sure, that helps. It does. But when you talk to people around Geyer, they'll tell you Eli is very smart, very savvy. And I do think at the same time, Carey's point's valid, where sure, Carey, or anybody, like I was a little brother, like I get it. Like you're trying to keep up, you're trying to do that stuff. At the same time, I think when you are that guy that, like if Eli was 6 foot and, just the perfect prototype, it would be harder to write him off. But because he was smaller, he knows everybody was like, oh, this is just charity. It's an offer that doesn't mean anything, when that was never the way OU felt about him. And I again, from what I've gathered, I think Texas had a good eye for it too. I think Texas thought he was a really good player. So that's just one of those things where I think it was easy to write people off. And Eli knows that, he hears that. But guys, you go back and watch his senior year at Geyer, all that dude did was make plays. I mean, in return game, passing game, he'd come up and be physical and run. Like, there was a lot of stuff there to like. It was just sometimes, and I fall victim to it too, as evaluators, it's really easy to be like, but there's that big blinking light. He's not very tall, and it's really hard to get past that sometimes and say, I don't care. He's just a really good player. And I think with Eli Bowen, I think he's going to end up proving a lot of people wrong.
I think there's a very good chance both Bowen brothers are starting in OU's defense next year.
Well, it's crazy because you go back to the spring, we had Woody Washington come in his studio and Family Business. That was the one guy he singled out, like the young guys.
Yeah.
He saw
I remember. He said great footwork, I remember.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead, Josh.
I will say, just because I guess I have the role as the negative guy, there is some comparison to all the same stuff we were hearing about Josiah Wagner this time last year.
Sure.
Oh, he's gritty. He's tough. He's, like they are the things that coaches love. They're kind of overachievers. They get more out of them than what you would expect to be there. Now, I don't think that's the deal with Eli Bowen. I just kind of say, let's be careful here a little bit, because we heard a lot of this same buzz. Even last year, one of my predictions in the Fearless 20 was I think he was going to start 10 games. Like, I was all in on Josiah Wagner buzz. So maybe this is me protecting myself from a really poor choice last year.
To be fair, he did have injuries that kept him off the field. I don't think it was anything, in terms of he wasn't performing when he got those opportunities.
Yeah, and I think Kenai Walker was just too good.
Yeah.
I mean, as the backup last year, he came in and just played really well.
He had a really good, again, and this is one of those things, like just going back through the tape from last year, he played a lot towards the end of the back end of the season, and he had some pretty good games in those last 5-6 games.
The thing is, he's a corner. Every corner is going to... Remember that TCU game that Woody Washington had that one year when they just got their heads kicked in? And that was an anomaly. It never happened again. I think it was Kenai that kind of let that receiver go late in the Kansas game last year when they went right down the field late.
Yeah, that was.
I can't remember.
It was and it wasn't. I think he had a couple good
Gentry
pass
got
breakups,
hurt in
but
that game.
Gentry got hurt, and then Kansas obviously got the ball back, but a lot of that had to do with just the situation and the weather and everything that
Gentry
was
got
in
hurt
between.
every
And
game.
a quarterback that was just playing out of his mind.
Two fourth quarter interceptions and couldn't put the game away.
I just think that
amazing
they have so many
that.
they have so many playmakers at that spot, and you can just tell the size too, of these guys. That's the biggest difference. Is the size and athleticism is just so much different than what it was.
Des Malone is a lot thicker than I was imagining. Maybe not as tall as I thought he was, but a lot bigger than I was imagining. We talked to him on Monday, and he's another guy that he's in this rotation somehow, some way.
That's what's crazy is you sit there and you're like, okay, you feel really, really good about your two starting corners in Woody Washington and Gentry Williams. Well, Des Malone and Kenai Walker would start for a lot of programs across the country. Those are two guys that are coming off your bench. And then Jacoby Johnson. That's the thing that struck me the most about what Brent said. And I really thought about it. He's like, we have guys at every level that would start at other programs across the country. And that's saying something. I don't think you could have said that 2 years ago.
It's still wild to me that we sit here and we talk for 30 minutes about Oklahoma defensively. What an afterthought that was in doing podcasts from 2015 to basically 2021. Really was, you talked about the defense, but it was more so, well, if they can hold them to 40, maybe they'll have a chance.
See, I actually had this conversation this morning with on a radio show because Jordan Phillips had signed with the Cowboys.
Yeah.
And they were asking me, was Jordan Phillips really any good at Oklahoma? I don't remember him. And Jordan Phillips would have been the best defensive lineman in this program if he had been here for the last 8 years. He was better than Neville Gallimore as a player. The level of players that just started disappearing from this defense mid 2010s is really the story of everything, of where we are now.
They had a handful of really good players. You see somebody, and we talked about him last week, Trey Brown. He was a damn good football player, but you just didn't talk about it a whole lot because it wasn't kind of the sexy thing to do because they'd given up 50 points the game before. Even though he might have played well, he gambled a lot, but he kind of had to because you had to get the ball back somehow. You weren't going to stop him.
Yeah, how many cornerbacks had really good starts to their careers and just fizzled out like Jordan Thomas?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I do think that and we've talked about it on the practice reports, just in terms of the overwhelming theme right now is not only is this defense going to be good, but maybe they could be really good.
When is the last time? And I'm sure you guys don't remember every single fall camp, every single year. It always turns into a blur at some point. But when was the last time that you heard out of fall camp that the defense was just far and away the better group?
2011.
Yeah.
That was 13 years ago. 12 seasons ago.
Think about that. That's crazy.
It's a full decade. Half the kids that are starting, quote unquote kids, half the guys that are starting for OU this year were in grade school. It's crazy.
Guys, the two things, and again, this is really not meant to pivot to it, but I just thought it was interesting. As I was writing up the Fearless 20, there were two streaks that get mentioned in it. One is Oklahoma hasn't finished outside the SP Plus in offense since 2015, Riley's first year, and they were 11, and there's multiple number ones. That's insane, that level of consistency. At the same time, they haven't had a consensus defensive All-American since Quentin Carter in 2010. That's unbelievable at a place like Oklahoma.
And do we think Danny can make it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe this is just the way that I've taken it in, but all of the preseason teams that he's been announced to here over the last month, I guess in a way I've been a little surprised just how much of notoriety he does have nationally. Because when you see last year when the semifinal Buckus list comes out, and obviously it kind of coincided with him getting hurt in the Kansas game and then missing the OSU game, I don't know. That was kind of one of the big question marks going into the preseason was, does everybody else outside of this Oklahoma bubble feel like Danny Stutzman is this guy that we think he is? And I think that it's been a pretty resounding yes, that people do kind of envision him as one of the top linebackers in the country.
Yeah, I mean,
Guys,
the way that he got treated, with the award circuit at the end of the year was surprising.
Yeah, it made you think that, no, kind of far from. What were you saying, Josh?
Well, I first of all, I think OU fans should send the Butkus, I don't even know what their group is called, send them some flowers. I mean, that clearly had a role in his return. I mean, that's not a bad bit of news for Oklahoma. At the same time, guys, for me, I would say, and this isn't really meant to be like a debate point because I think they're both just obviously outstanding players. I think Billy Bowman is probably a little bit better player than Danny Stutzman is. At the same time, so much of this is notoriety, especially at positions like safety where people aren't really paying attention, and even if they are, they may not know what they're really looking at. But when you've got Malachi Starks at Georgia, who we know Georgia's going to be unbelievable as always on defense, and then you have Caleb Downs and all of his notoriety and recognition, it's going to be really hard to make a first-team All-American list if those two have the kind of years that we would expect them to have because they're outstanding players and they're really good safeties. And so I think part of it is, again, and within that pick, I picked Danny Stutzman to kind of end that streak. And I think it's largely because Danny has a lot of personality. He's well-known. Oklahoma, he's kind of seen as, I don't know if the face of the program is right, but I don't think he's far from that. And again, I just don't think there's a linebacker in his way in the same way it is for Billy Bowman.
We're talking about defensive line. I want to get to that. The one thing about linebackers I thought was interesting in the last, that's been around the offices is we're talking about Dusty Dvorak, on the family business. And he mentioned, I thought it was interesting, of course he mentioned Kip Lewis, but he mentioned Lewis Carter alongside with him as standouts at linebacker. And obviously, he talked really highly about Kobe McKenzie. And he said that he thought things were better with Jaron Kanik right now. But that we haven't talked a lot about Lewis Carter. But, I mean, if he's making that kind of jump, you talk about the size that maybe Kip Lewis doesn't have. Lewis has all of that size. Lewis Carter.
In the bottom half.
Yeah.
He's not the tallest human in the entire world, but I would say
he's
that
what you expect a linebacker to look
well,
like.
he's just one of those guys that, I think that we've talked about time and time again when you started talking about evaluations, Josh, and go back into high school. Like, he didn't have the notoriety from the recruiting rankings, but at the same time, you turned on the tape and I'd go back to that time that you went down and saw him, and it was like, oh God, this is a guy that is perfect for what Brent Venables wants to do. He's just a football player.
Well, and guys, to me, this is how you rebuild your defensive reputation because Oklahoma wasn't going to walk in and beat Georgia and Alabama for elite guys. But if you go find the right guys and you can develop them and you can turn those guys into NFL guys, well, then the next group, 3-4 years down the road can say, well, look what they did with Lewis Carter. I'm 3 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier, and I run just as that's when you start to do that. And that's like everybody loves to talk about, look at that great defensive line that Clemson had with all the, the Dex Lawrence, the Christian Wilkins, and all the big time guys. But it was 4 years before when they had Grady Jarrett and they had that whole crew that really was about great evaluations, finding players that fit what they wanted to do and turning those guys into outstanding players. That's what they're trying to do here, in my opinion. Now, it helps a lot that, you had a generational type talent like David Stone coming out of Oklahoma. We don't see defensive linemen like that come out of Oklahoma very often. So that's great. Danny Okoye, same deal. So they've got some boosts and some good timing, but at the same time, that is how you do this, and that's how you get these guys. Same deal with Kip Lewis. If Kip Lewis coming out of high school was, an inch taller and 20, 30 pounds heavier, he's got an offer from every program in the country and is, probably doesn't pick Oklahoma. So I think they've laid a good plan, and now we're starting to see those guys. Lewis Carter and Kip Lewis are two of the most instinctual football players you will see, and there's never been any doubt why Brent Venables would love those guys.
It does seem to like, I know that it's a name that you've brought up a couple times, George. Kobe McKenzie seems like he's had a massive spring that has led into a massive preseason, and certainly a guy, when you're talking about the linebacker group, I kind of consider it, he's in that group now. Like, he has made that jump into that, whatever it is with Danny and Kip. Lewis Carter's probably joined him as well. It just seems like those guys that's about as strong of a unit at linebacker as I can remember in a while.
I think you're going to see Kobe McKenzie quite a bit, and I know that they've been playing him at the mic, and they'll move Danny over to the will, and I think you're going to see a lot of that this year. I think it was Teddy I think said it on the Oklahoma Breakdown. Danny's best at the will. Now he's just best on the field, like you want him on the field, and Kip Lewis is really, really good, and that's probably your best duo is Danny and Kip. But I could see some situations where they're playing Kobe and Danny together out there and doing some different things. I think that Kobe's really good in the run game. I think he's a good blitzer. Like he's just a very solid player that, I think he was one of those guys that we all thought like, could he maybe jump in the portal just because, he could go start somewhere else. Like he's a good football player. He's stuck around and I think he's going to play a lot this year. And then you look at, like, I don't want to jump all the way to 2025, but if you're starting linebackers in 2025 or some combination of Kobe McKenzie, Kip Lewis, and Lewis Carter, that's a pretty good group. And obviously you lose Danny, who's going to be maybe the best linebacker in the country, but that's still a really, really solid group. Jaron Kanik too, and I know we haven't talked a ton about him, and we'll see what his rotation is. But if he's your fourth or fifth guy at linebacker, that's a pretty solid group.
Josh, is it just almost crazy to you to think about what Brent's been developing in that linebacker room? Because you go back to OU's best days. I mean, you go back to was it really Ryan Reynolds? Was that his name? Because the actor
Ryan Reynolds from Vegas, from Bishop Gorman.
Bishop Gorman. That's so weird to think his name was Ryan Reynolds, and now Ryan Reynolds is like the most famous person in the world. But like when he had his knee injury, it set that entire unit back. I mean, remember the Brandon Crow game against Texas, and the death threats to Tom Wart that we had to sit through after that Cincinnati game. It's like,
but then it kind of like rebounded, didn't it, with Dom Alexander, and then you got into like later on. I guess it would have been Kenneth Murray, who's had a fantastic career in the
NFL.
NFL.
Post.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Here,
I see what you're saying.
He never had just this ridiculous. Like when he first got here, of course, he had Teddy waiting in the wings when he had Rocky and Torrance Marshall. But it was never like just an embarrassment of riches like it seems to be becoming now for Brent at linebacker.
I think Box would have probably gotten into that mix.
Oh, he would have been great.
Danny, the way that we're talking about Danny before the 2012
season. If Box
season.
didn't have his knee taken out in that Bedlam game,
yeah,
he would have come out of that season after playing in the national championship, and everybody would have had him on preseason lists for everything, I think.
Have you guys
Keenan Clayton was excellent as well.
I hate to,
but he started out as a strong safety.
Yeah, he was more of a move down, wasn't he? Like they converted him.
I hate to interrupt this, but the breaking news of Robert Griffin III being fired is pretty crazy.
Whoa!
For what?
I have no idea. They just reporting that ESPN has fired Robert Griffin III.
Oh, they used the word fired?
Yeah.
Damn.
I mean, he's very controversial on TikTok and stuff.
Really?
Yeah, he must have said some stuff.
He had 2 years remaining on his deal.
Damn.
Anyways, well, I just found that news shocking.
It's probably from putting a oversized croissant in his mouth.
I did see that picture.
Do they have to take down that awful-looking statue now at Baylor?
Should we? I feel like we are sunshine pumping too much on this podcast, but
well, I mean, I do think that, like,
let's go.
If we want to make the turn, you can talk about the defensive line all you want. Obviously, DJ Terry, Dominic Williams, those are those guys. But it's kind of like what Teddy said. Like, they have to find somebody on the edge, whether that be our Mason Thomas or Caden Woolard, or I think that we're still kind of reverting back to this idea that, like, Ethan Downs, I still think I'm still kind of amazed that he had the type of season he did a year ago. We'll see. I don't see him as necessarily a guy that is going to be getting after the quarterback a whole lot.
Poor Ethan Downs and Sooner Scoop. It's just
I thought he was fantastic last year,
was.
And I think that he's going to be a big player in this year's defense. I just don't know, like, who's going to be that guy on third down. Go get the quarterback, big guy.
Well, here's so I was looking up stats because in the pod that was not recorded, Josh was talking about sacks, and Josh, I think you said you didn't think anybody would have over 7 sacks in the season. Well, so I was looking back at last year's stats and also the last 5 years of the sack leaders, and I think it was Isaiah Thomas in 2021 had, I want to say, 8 sacks that season, but Ethan Downs led the team last year with 4.5 sacks. Number 2 is Danny Stutzman with 3. Like, your linebacker, as good as Danny Stutzman is, your linebacker should not be the second guy in that list. And like, I think Ethan can have probably, 4 or 5, maybe 6 sacks this next season, but they need somebody to kind of get, and maybe it's a group effort. Like, I was looking at the total sack numbers. Last year, they only had 24 sacks as a group. In 2022, they had 28. 2021, 33. 2020, they had 37 sacks. 2019, 32. And we know those defenses had issues, but that I don't know if they have a Nick Benito or an Isaiah Thomas who could just beat guys one-on-one off the edge or even on the interior. I don't know. I think you like the potential. Like, you think an R. Mason Thomas could maybe be that guy. You think, maybe a PJ could be that guy. But I kind of agree with Josh. I don't know if they have somebody on this roster right now that's going to hit over 7 sacks this season.
Can I give you
those numbers in 2022 were inflated too, because remember after the
Reggie Grimes led
game,
them in sacks.
They led the country in sacks coming out of like week 4, and then it was like they couldn't even breathe on a quarterback at the end of the season.
I'd still take great pride in calling that Reggie Grimes. That was never gonna last. That was so not real.
He's at Memphis
guys.
now?
The other thing to aid what George is saying, guys, there wasn't another defensive lineman, unless I'm just missing it on this stat sheet, that had more than 1 sack last year. Yeah. Not one defensive lineman had more than 1 sack. I don't think that's tenable. Like, I don't think that's something that can work.
And the one guy that I've heard that has been their best defensive lineman pass rusher is Grayson Holton, and he's in that same category of R. Mason Thomas, PJ Adebaraway, like these guys that you're like, I like the potential, but we haven't seen it yet in like a real meaningful game.
Well, and I think the fact that Brent brought up Danny Okoye's name tells you something that they're searching. They're trying to find someone,
and I keep
that
saying
can make a difference off
he's
the edge.
He's so twitchy, and his talent is just through the roof. Can you find a package for him where it's 3rd and long, or it's some sort of situation? You say, all right, Danny, just go, just let him loose, let him go off the edge, stunt him, do whatever. And I think they're coming up with some different packages where you've got some combination of like R. Mason Thomas, PJ Adebaraway, and Trace Ford all on the field at the same time, and they're just letting them loose. And I think they're going to come up with some situations like that, because I think Brent knows when you look at those sack numbers, those have to go up. Like they can't, like, as good as their secondary is going to be this year, and as good as those linebackers are, you can't let quarterbacks just sit back there and have time. And so I wonder if they can, dial up some different blitz packages. And I think they just are hopeful that somebody can emerge, because you can't just continue to rely on these great, blitzes and bringing extra pressure. Like, at some point you need somebody that, is going to win on the, outside.
Well, George, you and I have been talking about one guy that nobody really is seemingly talking that much about, and Dusty brought him up yesterday, and that's Caden Woolard.
Yeah, I love Caden Woolard.
If there's going to be a guy that kind of comes out of nowhere and provides something for you, I think it's going to be Caden Woolard.
Well, and I think last year, did he have 9.5 sacks, or was it 9 sacks and like 12.5 tackles for loss, something like that?
The number, I'm pretty sure, was 9. He was number 4 in the country in returning players, the sack totals from a year ago.
I don't think he's going to hit 9, but like, if you could have Caden Woolard hit 6, Ethan Downs hit 5 or 6, R. Mason Thomas hit 5 or 6. Like, if you can have like
Adebora hit 2 or 3,
right? Like, if you can have like 4 or 5 guys that hit somewhere in the range of 4 to like 6 to 7, like then you're in business. Like, that doesn't mean that you still want somebody that could go get 10 in a season, but like, if you can have just kind of a group effort, and I think Caden Woolard is a guy that could definitely go out there and get 4, 5, 6 sacks this year. Then you're in business. Like, then you're really in a good spot. And he's somebody that I think has really stood out in camp. Big guy, does have some twitch, and I think right now is probably in that same category as one of their better pass rushers.
I'll just say this, Josh. From all the video
hang on. I just let me correct something real quick. I said nobody had more than 1 sack. PJ had 1.5 last year, and Marcus Stripling had 2.5. It was on a further scroll I just didn't see.
And I think Marcus's, did one of those come in the Alamo Bowl?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'll say this:
He loved
Josh,
the bowl game.
He was the Alamo Bowl MVP 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
Or
Played well.
2 of 3 years.
He did play well.
Of all the tape that we watched and that you went out and got, Josh, last year, I mean, I am just enamored with the possibility of Danny Okoye playing a specialist role because I just haven't seen a guy that size, especially the stuff he had when he was on offense. I mean, like, that moves that well. I'm just so intrigued by what he might be able to do, even just going out there, 5 snaps a game.
It's just amazing to think where he's coming from as well. I mean, he was playing homeschool ball. He was practicing with his homeschool team literally a year ago.
Guys, it's one of those things I always worry a little bit because I like Danny so much on a personal level that I worried, like, maybe I'm crazy. But, guys, I've said it since the spring, really since I saw him in that game in person during the kind of middle of his senior year. His physical talents, I didn't think they were that different than PJ's. Now, they're different in what makes him special, but his ceiling, I don't think it's that different. And I think PJ is a first-round pick someday. Like, I think that is in his physical ability, like that's a possibility for him. Now, there's a lot of room to grow and all that sort of thing. And that's the difference to me between PJ and Danny. The stuff that makes Danny special, it's kind of like what George was just talking about. Can you find some scenarios where he can just let it fly? Like, just get him out there and let him go chase down the quarterback, like 3rd and long, like situational, where you're talking about, could you get a situation where you have R. Mason Thomas and, Danny on the field at the same time? That's a lot of speed coming off the corner for any team to have 2 tackles to deal with. There's a few, but there's not many that can deal with that kind of speed. And knowing Danny's already 250, 255, like, he's not a kid that's going to get run over. He's always been a weight room guy. So, again, he's got to grow a lot. I know it's a lot to put on him, and we all watched it with PJ last year where we kind of kept waiting for that moment. Maybe the same will happen this year. I don't know. But, again, with Danny, just some of the lower body flexibility and burst and stuff that he has, it's not normal, like the things he can do.
All right. I think the only thing left for us to talk about really is the interior defensive line, which we talked a little bit about. And Dusty's take yesterday was, he was high on Grayson Halton and what he was doing. To me, he seemed to be higher on Jaden Jackson than I've heard anybody be, just in terms of physicality, ability to play inside, ability to play as a freshman. But again, that's relying on a lot of things that generally doesn't happen unless you're Tommy Harris and Dusty Dvorak.
In terms of
I was wondering,
in from day one.
Could Dusty see a kindred spirit in Jaden Jackson? Like, much as Jaden is in David's, kind of shadow, it was the same deal for Dusty with Tommy.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like, though, that, like, in just looking at him, he is just one of those just kind of fire hydrant guys that he can sit down, and we'll see what the strength looks like up against, some of these bigger SEC teams, especially in the middle. But he's a guy that just, you feel confident he can at least sit down and take up a couple guys to free up the linebackers.
You put him and Dejon Terry together on goal line?
Him and Dejon, and then, obviously I think Dominic Williams he's listed at 339. Is that right?
That's crazy.
Wait, what?
Dominic? What's he listed at?
I'm on the roster right now.
No, I'm thinking of somebody else.
I think you're thinking of Wee Woo, Eddie.
Wee Woo. That's what I'm thinking of. That guy's 339. Certainly doesn't look it. But
Williams doesn't look 319.
No. And he's not the tallest guy. But
no.
I will say the defensive line, I think it's pretty solid. The 4 guys leading the rotation are DJ Terry, Dominic Williams, Jaden Jackson, and Grayson Halton. And then right behind him, to round out that 6-man, I think is David Stone and Ashton Sanders. I've heard really good things about Ashton Sanders. I think he's having a good camp, and is gonna play a little bit this year. But those first 4 that I mentioned, I think are going to be kind of carrying the load for most of the year.
Dominic Williams kind of physically reminds me a little bit of Casey Walker. Would that be?
Yeah. I'd like a better athleticism comparison.
Sure.
Well, and it was interesting what Dusty said yesterday. He did call a couple of his games when he was at TCU, but the defense he was playing in is kind of that defense OU was recruited against, which is kind of the read and react, and he wasn't asked to, basically rush up field. He was just kind of a plugger. and he thinks that his numbers could really climb at OU under their scheme. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, I'm at the point where we're now 2 weeks into practice that I'm really excited about seeing this defense and seeing all the formulations that they're going to use, just in terms of all the guys that we've literally talked about. I mean, even the safety situation, or whatever you want to call it, it's like, who's going to be the odd man out? There's going to have to be somebody. There's going to have to be an odd man out at cornerback, and not necessarily an odd man out in terms of not playing, just from a starting perspective. Who's going to be those guys that get the nod? Who's going to be the guy on like that big third down in the Tennessee game in the fourth quarter that they're kind of the guys that they're depending on, because they are light years away from where this thing was, just from on paper and what we expect it to be.
I mean, the best thing about it is you start talking about people are going to get left out in the secondary, and you just realize, okay, they're finally past the old stage of Pat Fields and Delarian Turner-Yale taking 90 snaps every game.
Like, I mean, you can't do it in today's game.
But it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Woody, especially if Jacoby Johnson, emerges, or Des Malone, or Kenai Walker. Like, you wonder if how much that affects like Kendall Dolby's playing time.
I'm interested to see, like, Kendall Dolby's another guy that I feel like he's going to be out there a lot. I just don't know who's coming off the field, or maybe it'd be the other way around. Like, he's going to be on the field. Who's going to be the guy that doesn't get out there because of him?
Do we want to talk about kicker?
Yeah, we can.
Eddie loves Zach Schmit.
No, I'll like him a lot more if he makes all the kicks and we don't have to talk about it. But it's crazy to me that, we report back and say that, he's had a really, really good camp. We saw him make the 55-yarder in practice on Monday. And
your point and everybody else's point is, great, do it in a game when it matters.
Exactly. And don't be mad at me because he's kicking the ball really well. And I know that people aren't like necessarily mad. It's just not what they want to hear. I think that in a perfect world, they would have wanted to hear that Tyler Keltner won the job and you're not going to have to see 34 out there. But if he's the best guy that they got and he is kicking the ball well in practice, go out and do it. Go nail a couple 50-yarders in the beginning of the year. Grow some confidence. It's just like a golf swing.
I heard he had another really good scrimmage on Wednesday too. So
yeah,
I don't know. I will see how it plays out. I still think back to that quote that Brent had at the luncheon where he's like,
we got to be a hell of a lot better.
Keltner's the odds-on favorite. I don't know. I mean, it sounds like Schmidt's maybe outperforming him a little bit so far through camp. We'll see.
And maybe that was a situation of, we want Zach to win this job, but give him a little boost in the pants type of deal. Who knows? I mean, it's going to be...
Well, it was the coaches' lunches, right? When they basically came out and said...
It's going to be a civil war the first time that a kicker misses this year, whoever that is. Oh. And that guy's going to be on the shit list, and everybody else is going to want to see the other guy. So
it better not be like a 34-yard field goal. It better be a 52.
I will not fault them if you miss like a 45, maybe even 50 plus. You got to be solid. You got to be solid from inside 45.
Yep.
Guys, that brings up a point for me, and I'd be interested to hear, because obviously I'm not there every day like you all are. George, Eddie, have you seen Brent use that tactic much? Because that was something Bob loved. Bob would always use this guy's kind of pushing when we're like, he is? Like, it was always a surprise kind of revelation. But I think, you talk to people behind the scenes, it was always kind of a nudge to a guy they wanted to work a little bit more, do a little bit more, whatever it was. I don't really remember Brent using that, but it does seem like it fits in this case.
I do think Brent's very calculated in what he says.
Yeah.
And I think that he's very intentional in the way that he says things because he knows how it will be portrayed. And I do think the kicker comment he made at the luncheon was something I don't know. I think Keltner probably was somewhat of a favorite, but I also think he knew that was going to get win back to Schmit. And I do think that competition has been very, very tight. Like, I asked him about it on Monday and he got a little cut off answering it, but I don't think he wanted to talk about it a whole lot.
You know what? I think when I hear Brent talk about it, I think he learned a lot from Bob Stoops, because he kind of handles it the same way that Bob does, which is you show confidence in your kicker publicly until there's no other option, and then you make the switch. I mean, Bob went through that with, God, he went through it with, it started with Tony was it Tony DiCarlo? Was that the kicker?
Trey DiCarlo.
Trey DiCarlo. Tony DiCarlo, I think I went to high school with. But Trey DiCarlo started with him. Then Garrett Hartley, remember, he had a slump in the middle of his career. He got benched, and then he came back, and then he kicked for the Saints for several years.
Won
in
a
the NFL.
Super Bowl
Yeah,
for
won
the
a Super
Saints.
Bowl. But I think Brent learned pretty much everything he needs to know about handling kickers, specialists from Bob, and he kind of uses the same playbook. He probably took a little from Dabo when he was, at Clemson as well.
Yeah, I was trying to think back to how I think Dabo's basically like, don't talk to me, don't look at me in the eyes, just make sure you make this effing kick.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Didn't they get a guy out of, he's like a student. Didn't they have an open tryout last year for kicker?
That
Clemson?
seems right.
There was something kind of weird there because he ended up making a game winner, I believe, for them, or he maybe missed one during the season. I can't remember, and it was kind of a shitstorm, but you just got to be solid, man. It's not that big of an ask. And I feel like in today's world, a school like Oklahoma should have a guy that they can trot out there and you're not thinking in the back of your mind, Lord, is he going to miss a 34-yarder again? Is he going to miss a 36-yarder like he did in Stillwater? That shit just can't happen. Or you are going to lose games and you go from, thinking 8-4, 9-3 would be a great year to hold on for dear life to get to 7-5, that type of deal.
You remember the most, kicker situation Bob Stoops ever had? It was with Jimmy Stevens, because he just kept supporting him. And then you had that Florida State game where he barely makes that. I don't know if it's. I can't remember if
with
it's extra point.
one of the all-time memes that was out there with Bob's face,
and the face on the sideline that Bob made, and
he made it though.
But it let you take a breath. Like, okay, Bob really does get it. He's not any good. And he's shaky and he knows it.
They got to get somebody. At the end of the day, I think everybody within the fan base would say they don't care who it is, as long as he's kicking it through the uprights.
Yeah, I'd agree. All right,
and I think Luke Elzinga is going to be really good. He was exceptional at the end of last year.
Yeah, he really was.
And they can use that as I think it goes back to last year. It's like,
but that was another one they stood behind Pastner for.
I have no idea what was happening there.
And I think Brent's even made mention it's kind of a mistake on his part last year.
Oh, and he took a shot at what was God? I can't remember his name now. Michael. It was the punter, the married Grace.
Oh, Turk.
Oh,
remember the shot that he took at him at the end of last year? We cannot keep punting the ball touchbacks. Yeah.
I mean, I think
it was great at the end of last year.
It was funny. I was looking at
S&P. Good in the BYU game.
I was looking at the S&P Plus stuff. I believe it just came out, some new updated S&P Plus stuff before the season, and it had OU finishing, I want to say, top 30 in both offensive and defensive efficiency, maybe even top 20 in both categories. I can't remember, but it had OU's special teams as 95th in the country. And I was like, that's the thing is, I think we all feel confident that the defense is going to be really good, maybe one of the best in the country. The offense.
I don't know if I'm there yet. Best in the country.
You don't think they'll be top 20? I think if they're in the top 20 in S&P Plus, they're one of the best in the country.
I think top 20 is different. When I think top defense in the country, I'm thinking top 5.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think they'll be there, but I think they're going to be really, really great.
If they were in between 30 and 17 or something like that, it'd be a massive disappointment. I mean, you're talking about a bunch of guys that Billy led the country in interceptions last year. OU as a team was top, I want to say 3 in turnovers forced per game.
Yeah, but they were 38th in S&P Plus a year ago.
Okay.
I think if they get to the top 20, that's a great season. And considering who they're playing in their schedule, offensively, I think they're going to get there eventually. They're going to make some explosive plays. They have too many playmakers not to. I think that they may not be top 10, like Josh said. I think they'll be somewhere in the top 25. But if they can make, here's my point. If they can make a big jump and cut it in half on special teams, that's where I think that it could really, that could be the difference between 7, 8, 9 wins. Is if they can't be 95th again in special teams. That is just horrendous.
Should we go back all the way to thinking where this came from? And even last year towards the back end of the season, the second half of the season defensively, they gave up a shit ton of yards, especially through the air. Is that all of a sudden going to just get automatically better?
Well, they got to stay healthy. I think part of that was they weren't healthy.
You were running out Makari Vickers. You were running out
Gentry Williams wasn't healthy. Danny Stutzman was obviously not healthy. Kip Lewis was battling some injury stuff.
Abused in the Kansas game in the second half, in the BYU game in the second half, particularly OSU and for the most part the entire game. Even though they did a really good job on Ollie Gordon, it was like there was just little breakdowns where it was they did get him into 3rd and 7 or 3rd and long, and then you give up 16 to the Rashad Owens kid up in Stillwater.
Or you get a PI. Vickers, remember the big PI in that game?
Remember that. The PI, I'm thinking of the Kansas game where you gave up the PI out on the boundary, and then Brent Venables got a 15-yard penalty, and all of a sudden they give up 30 yards on one play.
It's shit like that it's like you look back and the defense definitely wasn't as good at the end of the year, but they also just had a couple plays here and there where things just didn't go their way.
And for the most part, like defensively, and I know that you don't take a whole lot out of the bowl game, they played damn well against a pretty good offense. I know they got beat a couple times, but there was a lot of times, too, that OU's offense was putting them in bad situations because of turnovers, and a couple times they bailed them out. Like I think back to the Marcus Stripling fumble on the kickoff in Lawrence. OU forced a 3-and-out, and then all of a sudden Kansas missed a field goal, and they weren't able to capitalize on that. The Arizona game, Marcus Stripling had the big sack, or Kendall Dolby had the big sack to bail him out of a turnover, and they held him to a field goal, I want to say. It's just little things. They got to figure out ways to marry that stuff up, and if they do, maybe they can be one of the better defenses on that side of the football in the country.
All right, we've got a full practice report coming up on YouTube that's going to have all the players that we talked to on Monday: Gavin Sawchuk, J.J. Hester, Des Malone, Robert Spears Jennings, and who am I missing? Who's
That's it. That was 4.
I think there were 5.
No, we got 4.
Okay.
Samuel Musiga was running around, but he didn't talk to the media.
Yeah, he was doing some
kind of social thing.
So that's to come, but let's get into some recruiting. I know it's not a deep list to talk about, Josh, but obviously still waiting. It's the 30th, right? August 30th?
21st.
21st?
Next week.
Okay, next. So this is pretty near
Yep.
the Michael Fasusi announcement. I know Steve Wiltfong had something out today. You've had things almost on a daily basis since you've been back. But let's start there.
Yeah, with the Fasusi, we talked for a month, guys, about this was going to be, the time. Like for 3 weeks, you're just kind of doing whatever, and you're hearing the same stuff. For a week, but that final week, that's when we were going to find out. And every day, I kind of trying to find a way to post something because it's basically like another week checked off the calendar, another day checked off the calendar, and you're just like, it's still going. It still seems right. Everything still seems good. I have yet to hear that thing that makes me say, okay, I'm going to put a prediction in. I'm ready to go that far with it. Like I've just seen this. I've been on this ride too many times. Like I've seen it where everything looks like it does right now. Right now, I feel great about Oklahoma and Michael Fasusi. I think that's the way this is going to go. At the same time, I know Texas A&M's not giving up. I know Texas isn't giving up. In spite of some illusions that I've heard out there that are, Texas is just backing away. They want to spend their money elsewhere, blah, blah, blah. Bullshit. Just bullshit. There's no other way to say that. That is not what's happening. They need a tackle. If they lose Michael Fasusi, they just lost. And I know that's a tough pill for some to swallow. What I do think is interesting is I talked to somebody last night who, let's say, has some connection with some of the money men around Texas, knows some people that would know what's going on. And I just continue to hear no movement. Like there's no big, like something's going to change here or they're gearing up for something big. I kind of think Texas knows they're in trouble. Like, and I've been saying that for a couple weeks. Like that was my impression. But the more and more I hear it, it just sounds like that doesn't add up. Like this isn't, there's not going to be some late save that's going to change this whole storyline with Michael Fasusi, who, we'll stop almost through my full answer here. 5-star offensive tackle would be a massive win for Oklahoma. Guys, in the Steve Wiltfong story that Carey referenced a second ago, Alabama has the commitments of the number 2 and number 8 offensive tackles in the country. If Oklahoma can close Michael Fasusi, they will have 3 and 9 with Ryan Foje and Michael Fasusi. So just an unmitigated success. Like that's what we've been talking about for 2 years on recruiting reports and the podcast and everything else. Oklahoma has to close this. And I think that's part of what we're seeing is that Oklahoma is being competitive. I reported about it with the Lamont Rogers stuff. I know enough people around that recruitment that were like, Oklahoma was competitive with anybody in the NIL stuff. And we know that hasn't always been the case at times in recent years. But it sounds like with Michael Fasusi, they've been very aggressive, very strong, and they're not shying away from anything. So I think Oklahoma has built a lead, and I haven't heard anything to make me change that right now.
It's kind of that way. Like this period of time kind of sucks because it feels like any news might necessarily not be good news. So you kind of just let that, kind of lie down until the 21st. You plan on going up to his announcement, or I don't even know, how is he doing his announcement?
Yeah, he's going to have a ceremony. He is still setting the time. The last time we spoke, which was about 48 hours ago, and I have every plan to be there. So that is the current plan. Obviously, we'll have pictures, video, all that stuff. I don't know how that's going to work with the podcast next week because obviously it's on Wednesday, so we'll have to figure that out a little bit. But yeah, I don't want anybody to think anybody's given up because I know some Texas reporters that are planning to be there as well. So I don't think it's just going to be me and other OU guys there. I think this is something where Michael is doing a good job building suspense, but at the same time, the more people you hear, the more people you talk to, it's kind of the opposite of what we've seen in a lot of big O-line recruitments over the last couple of years where Oklahoma looked great, and about a month out, all of a sudden you started to hear it's slipping away. It's going in the wrong direction. It feels like it was Texas, and then after that official visit, the buzz has really been around Oklahoma.
All right, outside of Fasusi, anything shaking out there?
No, I mean, obviously, just as a refresher, we know Christian Jones is still out there. He's talking about making a decision the third week of his season. We talked about it a little bit on the recruiting report. I don't, no need to belabor it too much, but I do think it feels to me like a guy that wants to see what Nebraska's about. He wants to see where Nebraska is, what they're going to look like. Obviously, that'll follow that early meeting with Colorado. Is the offense starting to sort itself out, or is this going to be another deal where, Nebraska's going to slog through it offensively and the defense will be good? Again, that's the way I read it, but when I talk to people around Nebraska, there has been a feeling that he was looking for a reason to leave Nebraska. But if that's the case, and everything I heard coming out of his OU official visit, for the Champ U barbecue weekend, I feel like he would have pulled the trigger already. Like it felt like Oklahoma was a clear leader, had really done a great job on that official. I think he wants to see what Nebraska's like. I think he wants to see what progress they've made, what it's going to be like with Raiola at quarterback, all that stuff. So we'll see. And from there, we'll see what Oklahoma chooses to do. Do they go after another linebacker? Do they choose to use that scholarship that they clearly have accounted for? Do they say, okay, we're going to wait for the portal, or we're going to put that towards 2025, or 2026? Or do they go after an offensive lineman again? I mean, there's a lot of ways they could play that game, and I think that's as interesting as anything. But at the same time, I like Christian Jones a lot. I think he would be a good early get for Zach Alley.
All right. By the way, recruiting report is back. The schedule for YouTube, Mondays will be the recruiting report. Tuesday will be Tuesday will be our first practice report. Which will cover, what we've learned so far that week. Then Wednesday, Unofficial 40 family business. Thursday will be the game day preview. That'll have encapsulate all of Brent Venables' comments on the week and player comments that we have as well. And then we'll see what we'll see. Might have some stuff Josh and I are talking about, maybe doing some recruit interviews that we can release on Fridays heading into weekends. So we've got some new equipment to set up to have extra people come in on interviews. So looking forward to screwing that up too, on all the cabling that goes with that.
It's terrifying.
So yes, I apologize that we were a day late on the podcast, but hopefully this we almost went an hour and a half. So hopefully that makes up for it. Actually went an hour and a half plus 15 minutes that weren't recorded.
Should we go for 2 hours?
We've done that before, but no. You guys have a practice report, and I have a roast to get to.
Very good.
Oh.
Not the crock pot kind. A roast on a
I would like a good
100
roast.
on a 127 day or whatever it is outside. I don't think so.
Have you never gone through a crock pot mode? I thought you had.
Yeah, I did last year. Or yeah, about last year.
Why did it end?
It's a lot.
Eddie, how many days a week do you think you cook?
0.
Nice.
So
Zero
many
out of
good sandwich
0
shops
out
on
of 7.
Campus Corner.
0 out of 7. I used to though.
I like cooking. I enjoy it. It's something I've come to as I've gotten older. I like throwing something together.
Best thing about having a girlfriend is that she cooks a lot and she's very good at it.
Easy, Harrison Butker.
Let's not use the pod to profess your love for your girlfriend. You have Instagram for that.
Follow me on Instagram, George3 Stoya.
Oh, by the way, did you win last night?
No, but got my ass kicked in the Scoop Dynasty.
Like
League.
how bad?
34-3. Now
That's embarrassing.
it was a very
You've
embarrassing.
embarrassed the company.
I will say the guy I played.
You thought he's number one.
Did he
He's the
talk
number one
shit a
ranking.
lot?
I think he is the best player in the league. He runs the league in a lot of ways. Like he sets the sliders and the settings and everything. And like he was doing things like I like to just play the game and you run some plays over and over again. This guy's like disguising coverages and like playing as the linebacker where like every time I'd run the ball and there's a wide open gap, he's like shooting the gap and tackling me. Like it was just I was playing him. I knew like 2 plays in, I was like, I'm screwed. Like this guy knows how to do
How close
everything
did
in
you
the
get
game.
to just turning the game off?
Very close. I ended up at one point taking my headset off because he was like talking to me during it, and I was just like, I can't listen to this guy just talk shit about how he's just beating my ass right now. Like, and it was in a way.
Oh, was
that
he talking shit, or
no,
was
he
he
wasn't
being
talking
nice?
shit. He was just like, yeah, man. Like, if you want to get better at the game, this is what you do. And I'm like, all right, asshole. Like, I don't. Like, don't like just be like, hey man,
Wow.
Don't mansplain me
yeah.
this.
I was like, just
We're
tell
not
me I
supposed
suck,
to call our
okay?
subscribers assholes, by the way.
No,
We have a rule about that.
he was a very nice guy, and he's very good at the game. I also just I don't want to just have all these excuses. I just haven't been able to sit down and have a day where I just play the game and get better at it. I've just been playing when I have to play the deadline for whenever these games have to be played by, and I just am just not very good at the game right now. I'm probably in the average across the league. There's several people in the league that are really bad that have not won a game yet against even the CPU. Like I know how to beat the CPU, but when I play like user on user and it's somebody that knows how to really play the game, I get my butt kicked. And this guy just absolutely, I mean, he could have scored 70 points on me pretty easily.
You're fired.
Hey buddy, you're the one that wasn't prepared for the podcast this week. Okay, just because I lose a football
was
game.
prepared. Anyway.
Were you? The cables?
I like it when you get riled up because you're a bad trash talker.
Yeah.
With what George is talking about, Carey, I think at the roast you have to either show up wildly early, like just salt it in how early you are to something, or just be on brand and be late. Just be fucking late.
Yeah, it's a choice.
One beat, and it wasn't me.
On time is not going to cut it for me.
Yeah, Josh is. Is it tough having the girls back at school? Are you going through some emotional trauma, dropping f-bombs and BSs?
Yeah, I'm the only one to cuss this week. That's got to be a first.
Yesterday was first day, right?
Yesterday was first day. Yeah, we had first day drop
Tiffany's
off.
pictures.
Layla, my first grader, she just rolls in. She doesn't need us for anything. Like she's like, there's never tears from her. She's like, get the hell out of here. I got this. Lainey now doesn't care as much anymore. Like she was going to roll out and just head into her class while we were kind of, because the first day you walk them in and you take them to their classes. And I think Tiffany realized this is probably the last year she gets to do that with Lainey. Like she'll be in middle school next year. That stuff ain't going to fly. And even in the last hurrah, Lainey's teachers came out and gave her a hug. And then Lainey was just going to walk in the room. And I was like, whoa, come back. Cause I knew Mama would have been a wash if she didn't get a hug on the first day of school. So it would have been bad.
How are the teachers?
Nice.
I don't think that's what
No, I know where he's going. I don't think there's anybody in your market. Now, Layla's kindergarten teacher last year, Eddie. I think you'd have been a big fan.
Interesting.
But we're getting, like I said, with Lainey in 5th grade, you're getting less of the girls that want to play with babies. They just want to be around little kids all day. So it's more of, they're older. They're I don't want to say real teachers. That sounds wrong, but just more of a, they've got more experience, I guess is the best way to say it.
Damn, Sam Ponder was fired too.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're just cleaning house.
Yeah, they're budget cutting.
It's
Streaming.
kind of weird that they would hold them on through the off season and then a week before the season starts, they're like, hey.
That's corporate.
Damn,
man.
Sam Ponder, huh?
Yeah.
Wasn't she hosting NFL Live?
NFL Game Day.
Who's doing that now?
Rutledge.
Lauren Rutledge does?
Yeah, she does NFL Live, the Daily Show, but she was doing Sam Ponder was doing the Game Day NFL Game.
Yeah, like
Day.
the NFL countdown or whatever.
NFL
the
countdown.
Pregame stuff.
Yeah.
We should hire her.
Sam Ponder.
Yeah.
How's your girlfriend going to feel about
I mean,
that?
if
She's married,
if we need somebody,
That was way too eager. Cut that for George. Cut that for George.
If we need somebody to fill the the right wing nut job, yeah, we could probably sign Sam Ponder.
I was trying to tee Eddie up with that.
Eddie's like-minded.
Oh, nice save
coming in.
Christian Ponder,
I think Eddie's pissed because this could impact his Newsmax role. This could really slow you down, Eddie.
It very well could. Good
She
thing
might
that
get hired by Newsmax.
Yeah, I'll just go to Tucker Carlson Network, TCN. It is a little bit worrisome too that well, never mind.
Did you listen into the Spaces this week with Elon, Eddie?
No, I was watching the Cubs.
By the way, am I the only one that feels like Hard Knocks sucks now?
I haven't watched any of it.
The one last night was not good.
I thought it was better than the first one.
You thought it was?
Yeah, they're still just like, I think Hard Knocks has basically been ruined by these teams that agree to it or kind of forced to agree to it, and then they're like, yeah, we'll give you access, but you're not really having access.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we haven't learned a damn thing about Caleb Williams'
because
personality.
we're used to that.
Like they haven't gotten inside with Caleb Williams. They don't have any interviews with him. I don't even think he talks.
No, it's whatever. It's kind of now just become a precursor to the start of the season. I'll probably wane out of it. If it wasn't the Bears, I don't even know if I'd be watching it with the Caleb stuff. He did look good though. He looked really good against Buffalo.
Yeah, he did.
It was awesome.
Did you guys see the one they did in the offseason with the Giants? Like, kind of just, it was more about like how they run trades.
The
I
draft
thought that
and
was
stuff,
really cool. Yeah.
Bringing in all the receivers to interview them and all that. It was cool.
And Dable just seems like just a
Dable's
ultimate
a
football
badass.
guy.
Yeah,
like
he's
he seems like
awesome.
somebody
That's
that
a
you'd want to
dude's
hang out
dude.
with.
And the other thing is like Dable just runs that place. Like everyone, even the GM is just like they sit in that room with Dable and he's just dominating the conversation and like telling everybody how everything works. Like he is running that
I think he knows what he's doing. I just don't know if they have anybody that can help him.
You guys going to watch
G-men.
the Notre Dame version of that?
I
on
might.
Peacock?
I might.
No, I'm not Catholic.
Kind of interested.
Did you guys think it was interesting when they were talking about like the only guy? I mean, kind of like what you guys were talking about. Like, obviously, they're editing out certain parts and they're not letting them, Hard Knocks run anything they wanted to. But when they were like, I'd trade for Jaden Daniels, I thought that was really interesting. Like, they were like, yeah, I'd be willing to put all the stake in for Jaden Daniels.
Well, yeah,
I was like,
GM,
are they saying
wasn't
no
it
to
his
Drake
son?
May?
Wasn't it his son that was like, you guys need to go get Jaden Daniels?
Well, I mean, their GM was literally going to every other GM ahead of them saying, or behind them saying, hey, if you want to make a deal, let me know. Like he was letting them know they were open for business to trade up to get Daniels.
It's crazy.
Yep. My Colts tried to make a trade. I'm dying to know who that was. I want to know who the Colts wanted there. I thought
draft
that
night?
was interesting. Uh-huh.
Is
see what Anthony
Flacco
Richardson can
gonna
do.
start the season for them?
Who?
I don't know. Somebody's here. We got to end the pod.
All right. Yep.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll be back again next week for another edition of the Unofficial 40 podcast right here on Sooner Scoop.